Dear students, hope you are great. Today we are going to answer Chapter 1, Section 2, Intensive and Extensive Properties. Classify each of the properties listed below as extensive or intensive. What is the difference between extensive and intensive properties? Extensive properties depend on the amount of matter that is present, while intensive properties do not depend on the amount of matter present. So the difference that extensive properties depend on the amount of matter, like volume depends on amount of matter, like mass, like amount of energy in a substance. All of this is extensive properties. Extensive properties like volume, here look at this picture, like mass, size, weight, length, all of this depends on amount of matter. But intensive properties do not depend on amount of matter, like luster do not depend on amount of matter, hardness do not depend on amount of matter, temperature, color, boiling point, melting point, density, ability to conduct electricity and to transfer energy as heat, all of this is an intensive properties, do not depend on amount of matter. Color, extensive or intensive. Color do not depend on amount of matter, so it's intensive properties. Hardness do not depend on amount of matter, so intensive properties. Mass, density do not depend on amount of matter, so it's intensive. Mass, extensive, depend on amount of matter. Melting point do not depend on amount of matter, so it's intensive. Ductility do not depend on amount of matter, so it's intensive. Volume depend on, so it's extensive. Reactivity with air, intensive. The rest of the indicate whether each of the following is a chemical property or physical property, and indicate whether it is an intensive or extensive property. What is the difference between physical and chemical property? Physical property is a characteristic that can be observed or measured without changing the identity of substance, like melting point, like boiling point, like when you cut a paper. This is called physical property. Something you observe without changing the identity of matter or the identity of substance, like melting point. But chemical property describe the ability of substance to undergo change in identity. So it's something you observe, but change happen in the identity of substance, like flammability, rusting, burning, corrosion, reactivity. Flammability, burning. When you burn wood, what happened? The wood changed totally into ash and carbon dioxide. So something changed, the identity of substance will change. But physical, like color, when you observe color of something, you cannot change the identity of substance. Shape, size. When you cut a paper, the size of the shape and size of paper will change, but the identity of substance that made up paper does not change. So it's a physical property. Water boil at 100 Celsius. It's a physical property. So you observe that water boil at 100 Celsius, but the identity that made up water does not change. This is a physical. Intensive or extensive, intensive property. Diamonds are the hardest known substance. Hardest is a physical, as I described that the diamonds are hardest, but I didn't change the kind or the identity of substance. I observed that. So and also it's an intensive property. Vinegar react with baking soda. So vinegar react with baking soda, give So vinegar reacts with baking soda, it's a chemical property. And also intensive properties, chemical property, as it change into another. When vinegar reacts with baking soda, give us another example, another substance. So it's a chemical property. Substance totally change into another substance. Most metal are lusters. Lusters, I described that metal are a luster, so it's a physical property. And also intensive properties. Most metal react with acid. When a metal reacts with acid, give us another new substance or a new product. The identity that made up this new product is different from metals, so it's a chemical property. Any reaction is a chemical property because the result is different from our product is different from the reactant. And also it's an intensive properties. Given sample of lead weight 4.5 gram, I described that the lead weight 4.5. It's a physical and also extensive weight. It depends on mass, amount of matter, depends on amount of matter. The length of piece of aluminum foil is 12.2 centimeter. It's a physical and also extensive. It depends on amount of matter. Physical property, because I described that the length of piece of aluminum is 12.2, but I didn't change the identity of substance. I just described or observed that without changing the identity of aluminum. So that's it. Thanks for watching.